Yeah. Hey everybody, this is Brian Gordon with the Grow Food San Antonio project. This is a recap from the spring 2020 garden tour at my house, and it'll be a part of a series, so stay tuned for the rest of the episodes. So keep in touch. Bye. What we'll go ahead and start out with is some of the larger infrastructure stuff, like the rain tank. So right off of here we got 1,000-gallon rain tank. It sits on a gravel pad. You want to make sure that you have kind of a good foundation for it whenever it starts getting this heavy. These can be up to a ton or 2 tons. Sometimes once they start getting full of water, you got to have your gutter system up so that you can retrieve it. The way that you would typically hook it up to is what's called a first flush diverter. So up there at the top, I have really fine mesh screens on my gutters, and that really doesn't allow any particles to come into that first system. Any possible little small particles that would come straight down, fall into this tube here, which comes down and it's clogged, it's capped. So it's got a little cap on there that I can remove and empty it out. But what this does is it fills up. Sometimes they'll have a ball in there that'll float as it fills up. It'll kind of fill up, and then that ball will clog right there, and then the water will come from here and then start switching on over. That I've kind of learned that sometimes you don't even need that ball or anything in there. You can just do that first flush diverter without that, and then that as that fills up, that just creates a little deposit of water up here at this line that will start moving water across the top of it. Heavy materials, anything that falls through the system still at that point, can just sink straight down. And so we end up with this thing, as I said, is about 1,000 gallons, and it's been full. I can't empty it fast enough in this weather. Here is all tanks. You need to have an overflow so that it just doesn't blow out the top or blow out your system. So that's just a pipe that I got coming over here, and it drops right down into the garden. My valve system is right here. Reduce it down into, you got 2 options, a 1/2 inch or a 1/4 inch. Try to get the 1/4 inch. You want as much water to be able to flow through as possible. I got this tube, this hose running over to here. This is going to be going to, since this tank was at ground level, and my garden sometimes is a little bit above ground level, I'm able to get some pressure just by the water pressure itself, by the water sitting on top of itself, pushing itself out, get some pressure. But really you get a lot more pressure by elevating the tank higher off the ground. But since mine's sitting on the ground, I use a pump. So I got this from Harbor Freight. There's a lot of coupons that you can use. I think I only got it for like 30 bucks, maybe 20 or 40 bucks, something like that. So you would turn on the water hose, and then once water is flowing through the pump, you would plug it in, and it shoots out the water at pretty much the same rate that it would come out of a water hose. So then I can kind of either hook that up to irrigation systems. Now that it's pressurized, I'd have to figure out a timer system for that. But currently what I do is I just hand water. That way I can really just make sure that some of the water gets focused in all the areas that I need. And as I finish up the porch here, there's going to be a lot more plants coming back on here, and I'll have to individually be watering those. Real quickly while we're over here, we got 2 weeds that are kind of growing in here. This is just planter that I had sitting out, nothing growing in it. But this right here is wood sorrel. So this is just a common weed. You guys probably have it in your front yards and stuff. You can add this to salads. You would eat the leaf and the stem, and it also makes these little seed pods. Flowers, you can eat those too. Seed pods you can eat. Seed pods even have even more of this stuff in there, which is called oxalic acid, and it gives it a strong citrusy, like some of the youth at the Roots of Change garden say it tastes like Skittles. So super cool plant. The only thing with this information is that you got to remember you can't eat maybe more than a palm size within a day of this plant. So you can't make a salad completely out of it, but you can add it to a salad. Too much of this plant will have too much oxalic acid, and it'll kind of give you a stomach ache. Forget what this other guy is. It's like one of the warts, spiderwort, I believe. It grows up everywhere around here, but you know, I don't mind it. It's got a flower on it as it comes to flower. Sometimes those are the first flowers of the season out here. So, you know, help out the bees whenever they're coming out of the winter. Whenever we're talking about irrigation, one of the other kind of techniques is basically an Olla irrigation. So this was made by Deanna Kiersey. You can hand make these out of either taking two clay pots. You know, this almost looks like a clay pot right here. You take a clay pot and another clay pot and glue them upside down to each other, clog the hole on the bottom of the clay pot with like a piece of tile or glue, something kind of there to clog that hole. And then you can leave the other upper hole to fill the clay pot. But basically how this irrigation technique works is basically it's unglazed clay. It's glazed right up here, but what we do is we bury it in the soil to where the glazed part is covered. We fill this chamber up with water. You can put this cap back on it, and that will prevent kind of critters and stuff from falling in there, mosquitoes. It's a little broken, but slowly the water will seep out of this clay into your soil. So you can put this in with a large planter, maybe not this size, but you know, you would put it in a large planter and you can plant a bunch of plants around it. Another technique is if you don't got a lot of water pressure, you can take a bunch of these that you either made out of flipping two clay pots upside down and gluing them together. You can take a bunch of those little systems, plant them out in your garden, and your tank can just kind of flow, water pressure flow in to fill those up on a timer. You know, you don't need the water pressure that you would need from a pump system if it's irrigation where it's like a dripper or something that has to force it out of like an emitter or a sweat hose or anything like that. So that's kind of a good thing to keep in mind with water tanks, a good way to kind of use them. The soil will only pull as much of this soil that it needs out of there. So another kind of thing that you'll see out here already kind of starting is this cattle panel. It's also called hog panels. Basically these are really cool to buy. They can be anywhere from as cheap as sometimes used or dented for $20, but all the way up to $40 a panel. They can be used for fencing, but basically you can make these arches out of them. They can be trellises. So I have a pathway here, but I can still actually get square footage of growing space here. So that's how you want to condense some of these things down so you can use as many spaces as possible. Growing up on this cattle panel here, I'm going to have the littlest passion flower vine. This is Passiflora incarnata. The leaves are going to be used for teas. The flowers are used for teas. It's a calming tea. It also kind of produces edible fruit, but mainly its flower is just extremely beautiful. Good pollinator. So that's gonna be a pretty aggressive vine. It's gonna grow up onto here. And already kind of starting off as we come down into here, we got growing up in here, we got blackberries. So there's one of them right there. There's some more of them. So some of these blackberry varieties will grow more upward and kind of like tendrils, and so it's good to kind of have them on a trellis. They won't get as long, but you can try them up on a trellis. So you want to look for varieties that are the thornless variety. So there's the Natchez one. This other one was called Freedom. That was a thornless variety that I just saw and planted. There's some of the other thorn varieties you maybe just want to plant it in an area in a further out zone where you're not going to interact with it as much, so that you don't have to worry about the thorns, or on the edges of spaces. Right in here we also have Yarrow. So we got Yarrow all growing out in here. Yarrow is a really old medicinal herb that can deal with colds and fevers, and a wide list of many other things. I even just kind of while I was laying in bed last night looking up some stuff, found that, you know, if you got toothaches, people would chew on the leaves. So you know, always kind of try to research in little bits of opportunities that you got. This is a wild sunflower. Those will grow up in a lot of spaces, and keep them if you can, because what we want to talk about later is we want shade.